Well, good morning and welcome back to the Broadcast Retirement Network. I'm Jeff Snyder, and this is BRN AM for Wednesday, April 22nd, 2020. And our top stories today, the epidemic's impact on higher education institutions worldwide, and students file class action lawsuit seeking tuition reimbursement. Well, joining me now to discuss this and a lot more is Rick Seltzer. He is an editor with Inside Higher Ed. Rick, thanks so much for joining us on the program this morning.
Thank you for having me, as always.
It's great to see you and great to check in. Higher ed obviously is impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic, and we talked earlier this month about student loans and forgiving some student loan debt, at least federal debt. But I wanted to gauge your reaction. You've written several pieces, and your organization even held a town hall this week, or last week, I should say, about kind of what's going on in higher education. So what can you tell us? How are higher ed institutions reacting?
Yeah, it's been a remarkable few weeks. It was just, the end of February, I think they were still talking about this as something that was affecting study abroad programs and places that had campuses overseas. We had a reporter, Lindsay McKenzie, who did a great story about Duke moving one of its campuses in China completely online. And we all thought, wow, that's, so mobile, so flexible, so quick. And then beginning of March, it seemed to unfold at the University of Washington. They were moving classes online for 3 weeks at the beginning. And from there, it was just domino after domino. First, colleges were saying, we'll extend spring break, we'll move spring break, we'll move classes online. And before you knew it, it was the rest of the semester. Now we're talking about classes being online for the rest of the summer, and places are contingency planning for the fall. So we're seeing a lot of colleges, I don't know if you want to call it accept a reality or come to the realization that this is not going to go away quickly. The problem for a lot of them is that they're reliant on tuition and fees and room and board.
Gotta get paid. You gotta get paid. I mean, I get it.
Exactly. I mean, the nice thing for some colleges, for the research universities, is there is federal grant funding. There are other sources of revenue. The problem is, if you're not bringing people on campus, a lot of the grants can't get done. So you might not be able to actually apply for the reimbursement. Or, some of these big D1 schools, they get money from football or basketball. I mean, you saw there was no NCAA tournament. That's some ridiculous percentage. I forget if it's 70 or 80% of the NCAA's revenue. And that goes back to the member schools. And football is in question now. And it really comes down to, just like you said, got to get paid from the tuition and fees. One really important note for your smaller institutions, not the ones that are playing D1 basketball and football. Oftentimes they actually are reliant on room and board fees. Mm-hmm. And we saw a bunch of them have to issue refunds because, they had to kick the students out of the dormitories, except for the students who had nowhere else to go. So you're seeing these financial pressures mount. At the same time, they're having to move classes online. They're talking about costs with that. So you kind of see this vice tightening in a lot of different cases. Yeah,
it's unfortunate because when we last had you on, we're talking about the report that you did, 2-year, not report that you did, but you did a story on a report, 2-year versus 4-year. And, we were talking about consolidation among colleges and closures. And I wonder, my first thought is, does this kind of facilitate a quicker consolidation? And I'm really concerned overall about the state of higher education and getting the funding. And there were challenges before. This, to me, only exacerbates the problem, given what we just talked about.
Absolutely. Your question about consolidation is a good one. I'm honestly not sure how this is going to affect it, because we had a couple places say they were closing. Those closures seem to be in the works before this COVID crisis ever hit. So the question becomes, what does the COVID crisis do to closure plans, or M&A, which really is a relatively new idea as far as being widely accepted in higher ed, right? We were just getting places able to talk about mergers as a good option that lets you sunset and get your students a good education, as opposed to some sort of failure. I'm not sure in this environment which buy-side institutions are going to want to take on the risk of a place that's been struggling. And I'm not sure that the places that are struggling are going to have the time needed to find a good partner if this thing accelerates a crisis. So, as far as what the landing is for a place in trouble, I think that is more up in the air than it was 4 years ago. And 4 years ago, I had no idea what was going to happen. So that's a mess. And I think we're just going to have to see what happens. The thing is, a lot of places close their fiscal years at the end of June. And so you'll have a lot of board meetings coming up. And I think that we're going to see some decisions being made in the next, call it 8 weeks, that I think will be really important to watch.
I was talking to someone recently on the network about college visits. A lot of students, kids are getting ready to graduate, and I'm assuming they're going to graduate, even though the school year is compressed for many high school seniors and juniors. But I wonder what the visits of these college institutions will be. I'm assuming they'll be virtual. I mean, you literally can't go on campus without, and in your state, my home state of Maryland, you can't even go out without wearing a mask. And that seems to be the case in many states now to prevent the spread of this virus. But I wonder what that will look like, because how do you show off your wares as an organization, as a higher education institution? How do you do that? I mean, it seems to me that the embracing of technology is moving expeditiously like it is in other sectors of the economy.
Yeah, I mean, it's mostly virtual tours from what I understand. The question is, as you put it really well, I mean, if you have this beautiful campus and that's been one of your main selling points, does a virtual tour capture that? And does the campus matter as much anymore if the student suddenly realizes, wait a minute, I may not even be here for one of the 8 semesters I plan to be here? It's a good question. And then at the same time, you have existing students who are saying, this move online, it was the best you could do, but if we come back in the summer or the fall and I'm still doing Zoom classes and people are still breaking into Zoom classes and posting offensive messages in the background, as we saw happen in a bunch of places, you just have to wonder what that does to the overall value question. And then one other pressure that you and I have talked about before that I think is really important, it's not COVID related, but the feds did have an antitrust action against the college admissions counseling group. And that was already likely to supercharge some recruitment, some poaching in the spring semester. So you want to talk about taking the chessboard and throwing the pieces into the air? I think they're way up there right now.
Yeah, last minute in the segment, Rick, the CARES Act that was passed and it had stimulus that I think includes colleges and universities. You mentioned the end of the fiscal year. I'm wondering if this will help bridge the gap that many of these institutions are facing. I don't suspect that it will, just because the personal stimulus checks are only $2,400 for a couple, $1,200 per individual. That seems like maybe not enough to cover all expenses. So I want to get your take on that. We've got about a minute left in the segment.
Yeah, it's not even close. I think the CARES Act is something like $14 billion set aside for higher ed. You're down to like 12 once you do some of the carve outs for HBCUs, which actually probably needed the money the most, and some others. And half of that has to go to student needs. So you're down to a couple $1 billion. Now, billion here, billion there, you're in real money, but you have to remember there's something like 3,500 institutions getting this money.
Yeah.
The estimates for how much these places have lost, higher ed has lost, as far as having to give back revenue and or take on new costs is exponentially higher. So it doesn't really matter which estimate you use, it's nowhere close. A bunch of ratings agencies have come out with different ones. I won't quote specific numbers because they're a little over the map, but it doesn't matter.
Yeah, and I wonder, just my last thought on this is, I wonder if they'll tap into their endowments. I mean, some of these big institutions have endowments. Rick, I want to go to a quick commercial break. When we come back, we're going to talk to Rick about some of these students trying to get their money back and need to go to court to do so. You're going to want to stay tuned right here on BRN AM. Imagine a new television network that will make you richer, healthier, and in control of your financial future. This network is for the policewoman in Nashville, Tennessee, the baker in Dubuque, Iowa, the teacher in Lexington, Kentucky. We want to make the idea of savings and retirement culturally relevant. But what do you see as a defining issue of the midterms? Especially for the smaller businesses. I mean, they are the lifeblood of the American economy. Featuring exclusive interviews, current affairs, and docuseries. 33 years old, you retired early.
The philosophy is money only matters if it helps you live a life that you love.
But you got to start thinking about retirement as soon as you get in.
The Broadcast Retirement Network will drive very high engagement with premium partnerships. So this isn't retirement and savings for your parents or grandparents. This is for all Americans. And we're going to change the way you think about money. Welcome to the next frontier of retirement and savings. This is BRN, the Broadcast Retirement Network.
The windows on our homes, they protect us and the ones we love, but they do much more. At Renewal by Andersen, making your home more comfortable is at the center of every window we make. It's why we custom build our windows in America and install them in as little as 1 day. It's why we build our frames with exclusive Fibrex composite material that's 2 times stronger than vinyl. It's why our glass helps keep your home warmer in winter, cooler in summer, and quieter all year long. It's why we stand behind every window with a 20-year limited warranty. Why not help lower your energy costs while giving your home and family the best? Call 1-800-835-6525 to schedule a free in-home consultation. Buy one, get one at 40% off with this special offer. Plus, get special financing with no money down, no monthly payments, and no interest for 1 full year. Renewal by Andersen, the better way to a better window. Call 1-800-835-6525 now.
Welcome back. We're joined by Rick Seltzer. He is an editor with Inside Higher Ed. Rick, thanks so much for sticking around with us this morning.
Hey, thank you for having me back for another segment.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, this is so important. Higher ed education, really a foundational element to all of us here in America. We need our institutions. We need education. We talked about some of the challenges that many institutions or all the institutions are facing now with students not coming on campus and having to work remotely. It seems as though, just reading some of your recent stories, that some campuses are not returning. Some students have asked for the refund of their college tuition and have had to go to court to get some of this money back.
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, we talked a little bit a couple minutes ago about refunds being issued for room and board. And most institutions got in line and said, yes, we will issue a prorated refund for the amount of time that students are not in dorms or not using the dining halls. They've been much more, I don't even want to say hesitant because that's not a strong enough word. They have been downright resistant to the idea of issuing tuition refunds. And their argument has been, the one that I've generally seen, is we are still delivering the education. You are still getting the credits. You, in many cases, if you're a graduating senior, are still going to be getting the diploma. So that is what you are actually paying tuition for. The other fees go to other things. Not surprisingly, some students have disagreed, and not surprisingly, some lawyers have disagreed. So we've seen a couple of class action lawsuits getting filed for different things. The ones that I looked at briefly were against, I believe it was Drexel University and the University of Miami in Florida. And the basic contention is we are not getting the same value as students as we used to get. Tuition is going for the whole experience, the whole learning experience. It's not just the credits. I have not seen any of that get resolved yet. When you start talking tuition refunds, you start talking a whole new degree of complexity. And there was already difficulty figuring out exactly how much places were going to be paying for room and board refunds, which compared to tuition refunds is a relatively simple calculation, right? You take the number of weeks that a student missed in dorms and you prorate it for the semester. Yep. Tuition's harder because there are still some services being delivered. So how do you prorate that? And how do you even start weighing? Is a Zoom class 80% of a normal class, 90%? I don't know, and I don't know what kind of discussions are being had if any, about how to go about doing this.
Yeah, I just think the timing is it's a little quick. We're trying to. I get it; it's important, and it's really hard to establish what value, because value to you is very different. Could be very different than value to me, and I totally get that. I wonder, Rick, if we've seen this in contracts related to pandemics, and you've seen things inserted. Many conferences are being canceled. I want to talk to you a little bit about your town hall that you had last week and the remainder of that for the segment. But I just want to talk a little bit about, I wonder if we could see, contractual language in some of the tuition or the enrollment materials when you sign up for these colleges and universities related to pandemics and other unnatural or natural events.
Yeah, I think probably, contract law is really, if you look at a lot of contracts, it's just a great way to find out how people and institutions were bit in the past, right? You just see different provisions that are like, okay, so we know they added that. Even if you read your mortgage, it's like, okay, so we know the homeowner did this once and the bank didn't like it, so now you're not allowed to do that anymore. I think you'll see the same kind of thing. I know anecdotally the insurance coverage that colleges have for things like lost revenue oftentimes did not cover pandemics. So that is a source of pressure. And I also know that the sector had been hoping that they could draw the distinction between kind of this scramble in this semester and then kind of figure out, well, okay, so if we have to do fall, what do we do about pricing in the fall? Yeah. They may be able to do that with most students. Most students may be more forgiving than kind of the ones that have teamed up with some lawyers, but time's really going to have to tell on that one, I think.
Yeah, I think this is going to have to find its way through the courts. We're going to figure out this contract law. I think people, like you said, it's lessons learned usually find their way into contracts. Rick, real quick, we've got a couple minutes left, and I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the town hall that you all orchestrated. When I say you all, I mean you were a moderator, but inside higher ed, you put on a lot of live events where you bring in members of the faculty and the administration to talk about things that are happening, and you just did a virtual event. Do you want to talk a little bit about what you learned, how that went, et cetera? Because I think the audience would find that very stimulating.
Absolutely. So it was a really interesting event because we planned it as an in-person event in DC before the coronavirus made that impossible. And then we moved it online. We actually kept the panels basically the same. And we compressed the schedule a little bit. So it was about 5 hours of deep dive discussion on college pricing, tuition discounting, looking for a pricing model that maybe works for the next century, if you will, or the next 10 years at least. I led 2 panels. Some of my other editors, my co-editors, Scott Jasic and Doug Letterman, who actually they founded the company, led some others. And it was a really interesting few hours. Obviously, the coronavirus kind of hung over everything, but we were able to plot out where we've been on pricing because higher education is a very opaque pricing model. That sticker price you see is not what most students pay. There is a large amount of discounting going on. And discounting is adding increasing pressure, or had been adding increasing pressure. So places were looking for ways to dial it back, find a new pricing model. And we talked through kind of where we've been in discounting. We talked through where places have tried to go to give themselves more flexibility. Then we talked about kind of what do things look like in a post-COVID world. I don't know that I have 5 takeaways about what the next 5 years are going to look like, unfortunately. But I would really encourage anyone. You can get a replay if you go to InsideHigherEd.com, and it's worth a little bit of time if you haven't.
Yeah, we've talked, over the years with you and I about pricing and how that was inflating and going up and up. And I think there was some concern given everything that's happened and is happening, and we still don't know how this is all going to play out in terms of the fall and future semesters. Really timely topic, and I would say people should definitely check it out. It's available, as you said, Rick, on the website. And my understanding is you not only did it through conference, but you had video going as well, so that people could actually, which is nice. It's nice to be able to see people and hear people and do that.
Yeah, we actually went very slideshow light. A couple of the guests had slideshows, but for the most part, it was us talking. I did it right from this room. I actually had the light down, so no one had the light that's over my shoulder right now. But you could see us. And actually, one of the interesting things that I will leave you with from that, traditionally, in times of economic recession or difficulty, you'll see higher education actually spike. It's a counter-cyclical because the people who lose their jobs go back to school to learn new skills, get diplomas. It's an open question whether that happens this time. Different people think different things because this is such a shock that we've never seen, and the restriction on movement throws everything up into the air.
Yeah. Well, I think anyone who tells you that they know what's going to happen in any aspect of our economy or the markets, they're just not telling the truth. So I think it's a wait and see for all of us. Rick, always a pleasure talking with you. Thanks so much for making time. Great sharing your town hall information. We'll look forward to having you back on the network very soon.
Hey, thanks so much. Always good to see you, especially in these times.
Yeah. And that wraps up this episode of BRN AM. Have a topic of someone of interest that you think we should talk to? Drop us a line. And don't forget, for all the news in retirement markets, technology, personal finance, and so much more, check out today's edition of The Morning Pulse. So until tomorrow, I'm Jeff Snyder. Stay safe, keep on saving, and don't forget, roll with the changes.
Attention! The Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services has officially authorized new benefits that Medicare Advantage plans may include. To get the benefits you deserve, you can call the Medicare Coverage Helpline.
Hi, I'm Joe Namath. If you're on Medicare, this is important information. I called the Medicare Coverage Helpline and they instantly looked up my coverage. In this one simple call, they offered to enroll me in a plan that includes rides to medical appointments, private home aides, doctors and nurses' visits by telephone, and even home-delivered meals. The plan also includes dental, vision, hearing, and prescription drug coverage, all at no additional cost.
Don't delay. Call to see if the new benefits are available in your area.
Call the number on your screen now. It's free.
Call 1-800-757-1451. That's 1-800-757-1451.